Good morning, Sparkfest. Before I kick off this morning, I just wanted to provide the acknowledgement of country. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. So, welcome to building a startup ecosystem that is not racist, but is actively anti-racist. It is with my deep pleasure and excitement to be joined by Cormac Evans today, who is the founder of Naramili and Strong Brother and Strong Sister. Cormac has a very long list of accolades, but some of my probably not fun facts, but some of the things that I have been super inspired by about Cormac are the fact that he swam 200 kilometers to raise funds for men of First Nations and Torres Strait Islander backgrounds and cultures. And today we're going to hear more about his experience in how he has built an entire entrepreneurial ecosystem. Cormac, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you for having us, and thanks for the awesome intro.
Well, apart from your work in startups and in swimming 200 kilometers, but also dislocating your shoulder in the process, but still raising so many funds and awareness, you had a baby earlier this year as well.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
no, thank you. It's been a pretty amazing and I would say for myself a beautiful and learning journey. We've got two beautiful youngs at home. We've got Wari, who's 3 years old, well, almost three now, sorry, and then also little Winnie, who's around 9 months now, so a little COVID baby.
COVID baby. I do feel like that's definitely catching on, becoming a bit of a term. So,
Totally.
Cormac, I would really love for you to take us through the journey. How did you get to being the multiple founder that you are today?
Yeah, I think, before I start to, I just would like to acknowledge the lands that I stand upon. I'm down on beautiful Wadawurrung country, which has provided me with incredible opportunities as a child, and also for my children, but also as an adult today. And pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, but also acknowledge all the lands across the country because everyone's probably tuning in from different parts. And pay my respects to the elders of past, present, and emerging of all the countries from across, um, which is really important for me. Um, I feel for me, it's just been an incredible journey. I think as an Aboriginal man, but also for my journey through childhood to adulthood, just to be able to actually, um, rather than just sit back and watch, but actually be a part of, I guess, change and really impactful long term and systemic change is really important for myself, but also important for me to ensure for my children when they're growing up and their children, but also all the kids that we and young people that we work with within Strong Brother, Strong Sister, but also, just our community through Naramili and their families, and just to be able to really create, wonderful and meaningful opportunities for everyone.
So, what happened in your life that in your personal journey, what was it that brought you to the realization that you wanted to establish Strong Brother, Strong Sister, and also Naramili?
Yeah, I think it worked in a really flowy way in terms of from the journey from starting Strong Brother, Strong Sister, then came Naramili. And then it goes back to looking at with Strong Brother, Strong Sister, it was around, my experience as a young person, within school, teachers having low expectations on Aboriginal children and students. But also the, constant racism and discrimination that myself and other young people in school would go through, but then also, within everyday life. Then we're looking at, I guess the ripple effect from like stolen generation, which then, understanding transgenerational grief, loss, and trauma, and how that impacts on future generations, including, for example, my children. So being able to actually, for me, it was around strong brother, strong sister, was around being able to provide supports through community, through other young people to be able to walk alongside each other, to be able to achieve really great outcomes, um, but also to be able to allow our young people to have high expectations, to allow our young people to have the tools and resources they need to ensure that they can achieve their greatest dreams, goals, and aspirations. And then, I guess for me, starting Strong Brother, Strong Sister, it was a difficult time. And when we talk about, Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander as well, founders and businesses, we're 10 steps, 20 steps behind. We have to overcome so many different more barriers that are mostly forced upon us due to first colonisation and the ripple effects that have come from that still today. And again, looking at stolen generation and the effects that play today. So being able to, I guess, reflect on my journey in the business space, in the startup space, but also friends of mine and community members that I work closely with to be able to understand their journeys to, again, knock down those barriers, to really create excellence on all levels, to be able to support our economy, keep money within our economy, but also create a pipeline, of industry leaders and sector leaders for our community as well.
To your point around creating a pipeline, it's so interesting when we think about the existing startup ecosystem today, to be able to take the risk and go on to become an entrepreneur. You're assuming that you're at a certain starting point, right? That you can afford, like you literally have the privilege to know that if things don't work out, you're still going to be okay. And I feel that perhaps there isn't this awareness of the starting line not actually being the same starting line for everybody. So when you talk about being 10 steps, 20 steps behind, what can that look like in terms of, the actual process or the experience of an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think from my point of view, not having the opportunity to have family members that do have, whether it's inherited wealth, so the comfortability to be able to, reach out to a family member and say, hey, I've got this amazing idea, it's validated, but I just need a kickstart. I think that's one of the key gaps and missing pieces. And again, it goes back to, first colonisation, and we've lost, in the last 250 years since that happened, we've lost, land, we've lost our cultural identity, we've lost, our language and so many different things. And then again, the misplacement, I guess, of our people from, stolen generation as well. Families are being disconnected, communities are being disconnected, and again, loss of culture and our identity and everything else as well. So not to be able to, not having the opportunities to be able to just have that, I guess, that comfortability and that backing to know you're going to be okay when you do take that really big leap is a huge one. I'd also say, again, racism and discrimination is such a huge thing, and it still plays a huge role today. And just being able to step out comfortably, and or walk into a bank or an investor and say, again, I've got this amazing idea, but having people look at you differently, but just simply by the color of your skin, is such a huge thing. So we need to be able to knock down those barriers, and those barriers are still there today. So I think there's two real key things that we need to work on, that we, I guess, as First Nations people still have in place in terms of being able to have that comfortability to take those steps and those really big plunges to be successful in terms. But again, I think through the work with Naramili and all the other amazing, there's Black business, there's Trading Black, there's these incredible community-driven, incentives and support, through that, we're able to knock down those barriers. We're building up and supporting businesses and startups and everything else to then support each other to invest wealth within our communities, and then to actually have inherited wealth for our future generations as well from what we're doing.
I feel like you've touched on so many points that I want to go in deeper, but okay, so the first thing I want to talk with you a little bit about is just having that privilege of the access to a mentor or to someone who's already done it. They've already built a startup from scratch. They've already successfully raised. And as we know, so much of it comes down to relationship building. And so if you don't have access to those relationships, how are you even meant to get a start? So I completely understand that. So do you find that now with Strong Brother, Strong Sister as a mentoring program, what have been your observations, both of Strong Brother, Strong Sister, growing a pipeline of entrepreneurs perhaps, and then with Narramilli as well? What's the experience been like from your side, but also from the side of the actual entrepreneurs who are going through your program?
Yeah, I think, again, I think Strong Brother, Strong Sister, and Narramilli play really separate key roles, I guess, in the journeys. With Strong Brother, Strong Sister, it's all around, community, supporting community. So Aboriginal youth or young people supporting Aboriginal young people and youth, and so investing in our young people, whether it be and through our organisation in terms of like investing in a young person to go and study psychology or criminology or whatever it may be. We invest in that our staff to build them up, to support their own young people again. And by doing so, we're able to create really safe relationships with the young people. But we're also giving them a voice. We're giving them a platform to be able to lead, make decisions for themselves and each other. And then by doing so, we're able to achieve really incredible outcomes. But also, through all that work, we're empowering young people. We're giving them the tools and resources to be strong, healthy, and well. But also, we're giving them the option to be able to make the decisions for themselves in terms of what do I want to do when I'm older. And so we look at, I guess, Strong Brother, Strong Sister, I guess, as a bit of a kindergarten, primary school, and high school, and then you graduate in terms of things, and then you're still linked in with us and attending our youth groups or mentoring or whatever it may be. But you're at that end stage where you're sort of that adult to be able to make those decisions whether you're going to work in a certain area or a sector, or have the opportunity to actually know that you can go out and achieve excellence in a startup, running your own business or whatever else that may be, to then create a pipeline into Narramilli. And I feel with Narramilli, we're really able to just really rely upon our leaders within our sectors. You've got Jira, you've got Yolanda, Charles Williams, got all these amazing leaders and role models sort of paving the way, obtainable leaders and role models for the community. But then also calling upon industry leaders that are in the non-Indigenous space or the non-First Nation space to be able to really link our businesses and our startups up to be able to then create a pipeline. So be able to fill the gaps within the sectors, be able to empower those startups and those businesses and give them the opportunities to be exposed to incredible leaders and role models, to then be those leaders and role models for our communities, but also for the wider community as well.
I think this is a really important point, Cormac, because I feel that more and more the startup ecosystem is trying to lean in and become more inclusive and create a more level playing field. But sometimes I do feel that the approach is very much about taking a blind approach. So let's just base it on merit. But sometimes taking a blind approach actually perpetuates the problem because, again, it's back to everyone from the starting line. Is this something that you can share with us a bit more if you've seen it happen across the ecosystem?
Yeah, I think that to be able to lead and do that work properly, it needs to be genuine. It needs to be fully invested within, and it needs to be done respect, almost a sense of actually stepping back and letting and really hearing what is being said to actually sort of, to play your role, to actually step back and let that person guide and let that person show you exactly, without ever giving. Realistically, if you want it to succeed, you can't have an opinion in terms of, what the, for example, like what myself might be like talking to you about, if I was to talk about like lived experience for community and everything else as well, realistically, it's knowledge that's been learned over so many years, and it's reliving trauma and everything else as well. And so being actually not to be able to just accept and understand and respectfully in the most respectful way, I think that's key, if that makes sense. We look at reconciliation action plans and procurement policies and all these things. They've been around for many years, but most of the time they're to tick a box. And that's what we see all the time, is that it's just to tick a box and say, yeah, we're diverse. And it's like, okay, like how can you genuinely support a community? How can you genuinely support and bring in, First Nations people into a conversation without ticking the box? And I honestly think it's really simple, to be able to do so. And again, it's all around respect. It's all around stepping back respectfully and listening. That's how I would see it.
100%. I also feel like there's something around the language. When we talk about inclusion and we use this word diversity, like what does diversity mean? I feel like currently when we talk about diversity, we often refer to gender, but that isn't about diversity in the current environment. I mean, if you refer to gender specifically, that's only referring to women versus men, and it's not looking at the various other intersections that exist in our society. I feel like language is a really important thing. Let's actually call it what it is. So that's why specifically with the title of this event, for example, it's not about diversity and inclusion per se, it's specifically anti-racism. So I feel like, yeah, we've definitely jumped right in. One thing I did want to call out, and maybe it's in the middle of the conversation, but one thing I wanted to call out as we have this conversation, Cormac, is that when I enter this dialogue about race and anti-racism and culture and inclusion, I don't speak on behalf of anybody else except for myself as an individual. And, I wonder how you feel about this too. I think often, when people approach me about this topic, something I feel is that they expect me to speak on behalf of every other woman of color or person of color because somehow we magically all know each other. So I'd love to get a sense from you as well.
Totally. No, I fully am with you on that. And I feel that, as me, as an Aboriginal person, I can't speak for, everyone. Everyone's got their own views. Everyone's got their own journeys. And it's around me being respectful to understand. And even I guess as the CEO at Narramilli and Strong Brother, Strong Sister, it's actually about me respectfully supporting community and knowing that I can't talk for behalf of everyone. I've got my lived experience and my journeys and my values and everything else as well. And I think it would be disrespectful, for me to be able to say, yeah, I speak on behalf of all, First Nations people, and this is how it is, because, we all have journeys and we all have our views. But also, it's just not the right way of working, I would say, as well. And again, it's just around that respect and understanding.
And I think that's definitely a key learning for audiences as well. I suppose the assumption that there is just, even within diverse communities, there's so much diversity. And again, coming back to language, not putting people into buckets and, like you said, Cormac, having respect for their differences, because that itself is going to inform with. Okay, so just, I guess coming back a bit more about anti-racism specifically and thinking about how to structurally push that into the ecosystem versus, so being actively anti-racist versus just not being racist, just like the soft not racist. Okay, so, for years, the stats have been around. BCG reported that culturally and racially diverse teams produce 30% better financial results. Startup ecosystem is all about numbers and increasing how much revenue you can generate. And so that's why we're a very data-driven and commercially minded community. We measure ourselves against so many different performance metrics, but then this isn't one that is being captured. Have you come across any VCs that understand that diversity translates to better outcomes, and diversity in the true meaning of the word, not just the gender lens? And do you, for me, I feel like this is one way where VCs can say that, okay, this is the metric that we require. This is one way to mandate anti-racism. But do you think that there are other ways that you could literally mandate anti-racism? And is that even the solution? Like, do we even mandate anti-racism?
Yeah, geez. I think, firstly, I think for the first part, I reckon that we're still, in terms of, I think Jira Harvey is probably really driving a big movement at the moment in terms of like venture capital, and supporting. What's really cool at the moment, she's supporting like young people. Invest. Getting people to actually invest in young people to be able to support them to start their business journey and their startup journey, which is really amazing and really empowering. I think that she's really one to watch at the moment, and someone to be able to actually, link in with, to be able to, get guidance and support around that work. To be frankly honest, I'd say I haven't seen any like real key organisations in terms of, or sectors in terms of like doing that work well as of yet. But again, no one really works with the grassroots sort of startups and businesses. And so I think that our role is really around empowering to get people up to that stage, and to, so looking at, looking at sort of that journey and respecting that journey to be able to really empower people to get to that stage and, being investment ready. But again, looking at the actual community, in terms of like what's in, I'd say actually looking at like like venture capital and what's investment ready for them would be really quite different. I think that investors really would need to shift their way of thinking and investing in terms of outcomes and everything else to really see incredible outcomes, incredible investment, incredible give back in terms of money back into that investor, being able to really just adapt and listen to people like Jira, to know that, by investing in this business, you're going to get this, this, and this, which you would usually get from, what you'd usually invest in, if that makes sense. So does that answer that question? Sorry.
Yeah. No, I remember, Jira had shared, she had shared her insight that she was looking into the numbers around VC funding available for, more broadly, women of color in Australia. And I wouldn't say that appropriately captures Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women founders. But she was saying that the percentage is so small that it's not a percentage. So I think that in itself. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think looking at like our ecosystem is, we make up 3% of the total population, and then looking at our startup sectors, again, and that's a really good, quite small percentage, but it is growing rapidly, which is really cool. But again, I think it just goes back to being able to shift ways of investing, shift, the requirements, or the, of what an investor would usually invest in, to be able to really just give those opportunities, if that makes sense.
So it's interesting. I mean, I guess I have mixed feelings talking about, the anti-racism movement in the United States. It's like, we're not the United States. We have a very different, it's completely different here. I guess when I think about seeing active anti-racist stances in the startup ecosystem, I do look to the United States because I have seen some concrete actions there. For example, Alex Ohanian, he stepped down from the Reddit board and he asked for his seat to go to a Black board member. Um, and creating an equitable, inclusive startup ecosystem, like anti-racism and equity, what does that mean? It means moving away from the status quo that exists today. And if you want equity, it means someone else has got to give up a seat. So at the Creative Cooperative, we work with organizations who want to diversify their procurement. So they route some of their work our way, for example, and that that provides work for migrant women of color specifically. So have you seen these types of active anti-racist actions taking place in the startup ecosystem or beyond, perhaps in this like startup ecosystem, but also, I don't know if you'd capture social enterprises within there as well, but kind
Yeah.
of a bridge, yeah.
Probably no, I would say at the moment. I think we have a really long way to go. And I think before even that can happen, I think, Australia really needs to be able to accept and acknowledge the history, and the brutal history of of our what's happened to our First Nations people, and I think until we can actually acknowledge that piece of work, then we can actually start to move forward in terms of anything else. We can't, like a key example is, Jan 26, everyone gets so pissed off that, we can't celebrate, they can't celebrate, a day around Australia, when Australia was, I guess started or whatever you want to call it. But it can't even acknowledge and understand the fact that what that day means to First Nations people. It was a day that massacres began. It was the day that, awful treatment of our people began, slavery, rape. There's so many awful things that came from that day. And so we can't even acknowledge a day, and I'm not saying all Australians, but, when as an Aboriginal man looking at, my socials, I guess, leading up to those days, it's you realise where we sit in society. So I think we have a long way to go to be able to really even start that work. But I think also there's incredible people that are starting that work as well. And there's that like you mentioned, the key example, I think. But again, looking at like anti-racism and race, not being racist, it's like, saying, I'm not racist, it doesn't help the problem, But even like, if, like I, still to this day, endure racism and discrimination, whether I go to the shops and I get, looked at differently and, watched when I put my groceries through, or whatever it may be, or someone saying something really quite racist or disrespectful just due to my identity or whoever it may be, whether it's someone else in the street, being able to actually pull that person up and say that's not okay. We rarely see that, and so, but however, in a lot of ways we see, if someone's quite rude to someone, in a workplace or whatever it may be, we're always seeing someone say, you can't talk to someone like that or whatever it may be. So we need to actually be able to call out racism and, and start to be able to, by someone saying like, I watched someone get beaten up because of the color of their skin. And I didn't do anything, I wasn't a part of that, but so I'm not racist. It's like, yeah, but did you help? Did you intervene? Did you call for help? But that's where it takes action. And so around the anti-racism stuff, for me, it's around taking action, saying something, whether it's even addressing the fact that, yeah, I said this and that was, that was shocking. And I accept that, that was a racist comment and I'm going to work and do this now. And so I'm going to take action. So I think we have a long way to go, and looking back on past policies, and we as First Nations people weren't even recognised in the Constitution as human beings until I think 1967. So my dad was born and recognised as fauna and flora or an animal, and so and that wasn't that long ago. He's still quite young. So I think we still have a long way to go, and we need to be able to, I guess, accept and acknowledge. There's a brutal history, and that still hasn't been done yet. And so I think once we start to be able to acknowledge those, to then work forward to be able to really, set things in stone.
I agree, because I feel like there's almost, it's such a long chain of events. And Cormac, what when I hear about the experiences that you speak about, and some of the encounters that I have personally faced, first of all, I can't compare. And I think this is something else, right? I mean, even within underrepresented communities, there are so many different layers of privilege. And I think it's sometimes people don't have empathy for a particular situation because they just haven't experienced it. And there are two things. I mean, yes, we can try and have empathy, but where we haven't experienced it, how much empathy and understanding truly can we have? And so this is something that I'm really interested in. How do we actually drive that type of education? But again, in driving that education, who should be driving it and at what cost? Because it's painful to talk about these types of experiences. It's painful to have this conversation.
Totally. And I think we should, that's the thing, is how often should we rely upon people to be able to go relive trauma, and relive their lived experience, which obviously, whether it's reliving racism or discrimination or unfair treatment and all these awful circumstances, it's traumatic, and it brings up that trauma. And so, I think it's not up to, people of color or different religions or whatever it is to be able to actually continually educate, the wider community, because it's tiring. When the Black Lives Matter movement was, really driving strong, when George Floyd was, first, murdered, I got off social media for quite some time because you just saw so much racism, and you could not, I think a person of color and anyone that sort of really had a heart and compassion and all those important qualities as a human being would not be able to say that watching that and seeing the impact and the news, certain news channels and whatever else that really drive racism, discrimination and whatever, but also the awful comments and everything else, it's draining, and it makes you feel awful. And it has an effect, even our staff and all our young people that we work with in Strong Brother, Strong Sister, it affected them, And so I think at some stage people need to actually step up that aren't within within our communities or in other communities, but people of, non-colour need to actually step up and be able to educate themselves and not rely always upon ourselves to be able to actually educate, because it's hell tiring sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And I think, in the context of the startup ecosystem already, there's not a lot of resources to go around. Startups are generally, especially when they're starting out, they're pretty poor. So I think there's this overall assumption that you just do things for free, right? But I think assuming that someone can do something for free, for example, speak at an event for free, that is assuming that, again, everyone is at the same starting line. Everyone's got the privilege to do that when not everybody does.
Totally.
And I actually think one of the specific things that as an ecosystem, I really want to, I strongly want people to at least just think about that. If you could take one, there's so many different actions you could take, right? And I'd love to hear from you, what other types of actions. In my humble opinion, I feel like that's just one minor one. You've got budget for your food, you've got budget for catering. Have a budget for your speaker, especially if it's someone who's from an underrepresented community.
Totally. And I think also, most, like you said, that everyone usually has a budget for their speakers with anyway. And I think if you're not paying those, people that are really giving that, that education and that important piece, whether it be people of color, whether it be different backgrounds of, cultural backgrounds. If you're not actually paying, I think you're a part of the problem, realistically, because those people, for example, like First Nations people to come and speak, they're talking about, 80,000 years of culture that's been passed down, but at a period in time has been almost lost due to, like racism, discrimination, and past policies that are driven by racism, discrimination. And so there's been important people that throughout different generations that have held tight, that have fought really hard to keep that culture, whether it's that language, whether it's that, those stories or whatever it may be, many lives have been lost to keep it strong today and to keep it there today. And I think for me, that's how I try to piece it is around, is understanding the sacrifices that have been made to keep, me here today, because when we look at first colonisation, 90% of our population was wiped out within the first 10 years of first colonisation. So I'm even quite lucky to be standing here as an Aboriginal man because of because of our people fighting and making sacrifices for me to stand here today, tall, proud, and proud and strong. And I think that's a key thing in being able to reflect on in terms of cost for someone to come and talk. Because there's so many different things that have been put into that, and same with other backgrounds as well. I think that's key.
It's definitely something very nuanced. It's expertise, it's skill set. There's actually it's technical awareness and experience. And I think again, it's just shifting the awareness and understanding of that, giving it that language too. Cormac, it can be well intentioned that people want to be supportive, they want to be helpful, they want to contribute to addressing systemic racism. Sometimes they want to engage in conversations, and coming back to the point about speaking for free, it ends up being providing all of this free education. So at the Creative Cooperative, all of our education around First Nations and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures, history, it actually comes from both your Instagram, but we also follow resources like Common Ground. That's where we get a lot of our education. We follow plenty of amazing thought leaders on LinkedIn as well. So for you, if there are organizations and there are people that want to support, what would you say are actually meaningful ways that are actually going to be helpful for you, for Narramilli, for Strong Brother, for Strong Sister, and not actually be causing more burden on you?
Yeah, I think it's a really key thing. I think being able to really, even reaching out is a great start. And I guess it's just around, I think being, I don't know, like for me, I've got like I've got a no dickhead policy, and it's around everything that I do. And it's quite easy not to be a dickhead, I feel. And excuse my language, but it's the only way I can really frame it. And also, I think it's really key because it's really easy not to be that sort of person and that sort of human being. And so, if in your gut it feels like it's not right to, ask certain things or say certain things, your gut's probably right most of the time. But you can, I think if the intention is right and the intention is meaningful and well, you can ask those questions, whether through like you said, through Narramilli or Strong Brother, Strong Sister. We're happy to support and guide. And there's incredible other organisations out there. Like I mentioned, there's Black Business, there's Trading Black, and looking at the work that they do. Most of the stuff you can actually find on their socials. Most of the questions that you have that you want answered, are there to be, that with answers. So I think as long as it's genuine, as long as it's meaningful, and you want to have real impact, it's totally fine. And like I said, I think it's just going back to gut feelings. We all know when things don't feel right to ask. And so if you feel that nervousness to be able to, around something, usually most of the time it's not right. So I think it's just playing with your gut, playing with your head, and just being a good human being. It's quite simple, I feel.
And I've in my conversations, I've definitely seen people get it wrong, and it goes either one of two ways. Either they're open to receiving constructive feedback, or
Yeah.
it kind of is nasty. So I think, yeah. What are your thoughts around that? When people do stuff up, like, what do you think is the right thing to
Just
do?
own it. I think own it. Accept it. I think, like I was saying earlier, it's around, stepping back. And, if someone's saying, for example, if someone said to me that something, then I'm like, well, that's not cool. It's not cool because it's actually really not cool. And it's actually me, it's not the right way, or it's not the right thing to say, and it's upset me, which means then it's going to upset a lot of other people. So I think just being able to actually just listen and acknowledge, it's like, and just put your hand up. And accountability is such a huge thing. Just take take account. Be accountable for actions, and just I think as long as you can listen, learn, and accept most of the time, I think it's really key in terms of being able to, because if you're if you're upset by it, then is it really meaningful? You know, is it really the right thing to be? So I think
Yeah, 100%. Cormac, what's the one question that you wish I asked you during this conversation, or what is the one question that generally you wish people would ask you in the realm of this topic?
yeah. Oh, geez, I've actually never been asked that. That's a really cool question. I think that I reckon I don't think there's anything really. I think it's just more around, again, just being able to reflect. I think reflection, being a good human being. I think it all goes back. It's really quite simple to be, and I think the key thing probably is around just like how can you, like, looking at how we can support, is around just being able to, where you can, buy black. The amazing thing with the economy is, there's anything from stationery, to catering, to clothing, to anything you can think about that you would want in your business is there. And the key thing around is, how can you start to support in those small, impactful ways? Is just literally starting to buy black where you possibly can, whether it be friends and family as gifts, whether it be within your organisation, whether it be for your procurement policies. Literally, again, you can go to Nara Millie's website, or socials, or whatever it may be. Black business, again, is an amazing resource to be able to know what's out there. And same with Trading Black. There's so many incredible ones where you can literally scroll through and see almost like a directory of what is out there. So I feel just my biggest piece of advice, rather than a question to be answered, would be just start where you can, in terms of just, even if it's those small little things of buying black.
Hmm. And those are all communities where they're verified, in the sense that that if your dollar is supporting the community, that's who it's supporting. It's actually not, it's just pretending to be Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander owned business, which I
Totally. I
suppose
think
is like
that's
a
a really
whole
key point. Yeah, I
yeah.
think I'm just looking at the time. We've got about a minute, but I think that's a really key point. Ask the questions, because there are a lot of organisations and businesses out there pretending, or are really targeting their audience to think they're Aboriginal owned, to think that they're Torres Strait Islander owned. And so they're profiting off culture, and they're profiting off, and they're really marketing, really wrong and inappropriate way. And actually, I guess addressing, saying that, really putting it out there, that to make you think that they're Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander business. So really do your research, even if it's just asking, are you an Aboriginal owned and ran business? And when they say, around like, we utilize this, it's actually do the research and make sure it's ethical and it's appropriate. I think that's a really key piece before we go.
Cormac, thank you so much. We've got 19 seconds left. If people want to, what is the best way to do it?
Pretty much just jump on our website or our socials, shoot us a DM. We're always happy to help and support. Shelley's an incredible asset to our organisation, and I'm sure between us it'll be, getting in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cormac. Thanks everyone for tuning in.